Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and once again, I'm excited to hang out with you on Tuesday evening talking about my favorite topic, small business. As you know, your business can only go as far as you're prepared to take it. So at the end of the day, it's critical for you as a business owner to continue to develop your knowledge, develop your skills, so you have an opportunity to take your business further faster. And that's really why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, as a way to help you get access to some amazing leaders and business owners who have an understanding of how small business works and what it takes to be successful in small business, so that you can see who they are, you can learn what they've done, and you can, be able to incorporate that learning and that leadership into what you're doing. As you know, we love your comments and questions, so feel free to add your comments, questions. We'll try to get to all the questions. Also, we always have great people from all over, so please shout, let us know where you're at. Put it in the chat so we can know where people are tuning in from. And, we're looking forward to a great show tonight. Tonight's show is focused on accessing private equity for your business. My guest is Todd Billings, and, he's created many private equity funds. He understands, different sides of what it means and how private equity works. So it's not a lot of people really understand it that well. So, I'm excited to be able to have him on the show. I think you're going to learn a lot. I'm sure I'm going to learn things too. And let me just bring Todd on so we can say what's up. Hey, Todd, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Andrew, how are you? Pleasure to be here tonight.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I know you got a busy schedule and you're doing great things, but definitely thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Okay, excellent. So we've been hanging out a little bit as of late. So I know you fairly well, but you're new to our audience. So if you could take a few minutes to talk a little bit about your journey so they can have a better understanding sort of where you are and where you've come from.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm always hesitant when I hear the terms, private equity and things of this sort, because I grew up in South Central LA, was the first person in my family to go to college, and private equity was not a term that was spoken around our house. I was really, presented a few options as a young man, and it was really, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. And those were the two primary ways to get out of South Central outside of athletics or some nefarious activities, we may say. So, I was happy to get an opportunity to not only attend Johns Hopkins to study pre-med, but I was always fascinated with Wall Street. In fact, I remember as a kid, math being my best subject. I used to beg my parents for a newspaper every day because I saw this tables and tables of numbers in the newspaper. And as a mathematician, you wonder what these numbers mean. And so at 8 or 9 years old, I knew that MCD was McDonald's, KO was Coke, PEP was Pepsi. And for those of us old enough to remember, I remember Michael Jackson doing a Pepsi commercial. And so I was like, I want to buy Pepsi. And so I would literally paper trade as a young kid. And that was like a hobby of mine. That being said, I had no idea anything about Wall Street outside of this stock tables in the local LA Times newspaper. And so fortunately from there, I later transferred to Stanford, got a degree in economics, and started working on Wall Street after I graduated. So from there, I originally worked for Merrill Lynch. And then after that, I traded municipal bonds for Payne Weber, now UBS for some of those who were younger. And then later became a NASDAQ market maker, made a ton of money as a young man, yelling and screaming on the stock trading floor. And then I got into the private client side of the business as I started my family. And trading, I believe, is really a young man's game, and is one that is, for me, was tough to balance family life with trading life, because a trader is typically stuck on their phone or computer or some device, staying on top of where the markets are almost 24/7 if you're doing it at a large level. And so I got into private client side of the business again with Merrill Lynch, later with Bank of America Private Bank. And then I got into, I'd say in 2008, it was like the great financial crisis. And for the first time in my career, I had families, clients of mine asking me, Todd, is my money safe at the bank? And that was a really difficult, conversation for me to have with people, because the story inside of Bank of America was, we're too big to fail. All of my clients were first generation wealth creators. And I remember one of my clients, his name is Floyd. I won't share last names, but his name was Floyd, Midwestern guy who had built a really sizable net worth and kept about $30 million of cash with me at the time. And Floyd said, Todd, is my money safe at the bank? And I told him, the story inside the company is we're too big to fail. But quite frankly, Floyd, you have about $5 million of FDIC protection. If we went out of business tomorrow, you'd lose $25 million. And he asked me what to do. So long story short, we ended up sending his money to the Treasury. I don't know if you guys know, but you can literally send your money directly to the Treasury through ustreas.gov. But that presented a couple of problems. Number one, I gave my client the best advice that I knew to give, but I got paid on three things at the bank. I got paid on deposits, I got paid on lending, and I got paid on investment management. And the most profitable out of those three products is deposits. And I was literally sending money away from the bank. And so I remember having a conversation with my wife in the fall of 2008 and telling her that I needed to do something different. And I decided to start my own company. I started a multifamily office at that time. And as you can imagine, any of you who worked in corporate America, you have pretty strong non-compete agreements. So I couldn't reach out to my clients. But fortunately, all of my clients had my cell phone number. And over the course of my first year, 6 families had reached out to me and literally come aboard with me, ranging from 10 million of liquidity to over $1 billion of liquidity. And it gave me the start of my own multifamily office where I manage all the financial affairs for those 6 wealthy families. A year into that, one of my families brought a pool of distressed mortgages to me. And we ended up buying that first pool of mortgages for 26 cents on the dollar. To put that in perspective, $1 million condo on the beach, giving a real life scenario where someone bought it for $1 million, took a standard 20% down payment. So they had an $800,000 mortgage. The value of that condo had dropped from $1 million to $600,000. I bought the $800,000 mortgage for $200,000. So it didn't take a rocket scientist to know that there was some real intrinsic value there, although there was a ton of fear. And we were literally scared that maybe the government would cancel mortgages or something else would happen. But as you can imagine, it turned out really good for us. In a $19 million investment, 178 loans. We were out a year later for $30 million. So that was my first venture into true private equity. Four of the families in that partnership said, Todd, can we do this full time? So I started a private equity firm called US Debt Ventures. And I took a year to wind down my family office practice. And we went out and bought 7,854 loans across all 50 states in the country. And then shortly after that, we launched our 8th investment vehicle where we did bridge lending. So ground up construction, fix and flip, Airbnb type loans, all for real estate investors. And so to date, we've probably done over 1.3 billion in transactions, and it's been a really nice ride. So I know we're talking about private equity, but I really hope that as we speak today, that people can know I'm literally just a kid from South Central LA with a dream, and just super happy to have made it to this point, and happy to share any wisdom and knowledge and stories that may help the audience.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. Definitely you've had a great journey, and I know what you're doing now, and you're going to have an even very exciting journey going forward as well. And that's the great thing about being an entrepreneur and business owner. You can create your own reality in your own space. Definitely, through that journey you have done a lot of different things, but there's always been a thread of the financial and finance piece in everything you've done. And most business owners, me as well, every couple of years my business changes totally. So it's not surprising that you've been doing a lot of things, but this is excellent. So definitely we've already got some questions in the chat, which I appreciate. Definitely always also appreciate comments. Definitely Daniel, Darren, Devon, definitely appreciate that kicking us off once again. Just if you can put your location in the chat. I always like to know where people are coming from. We usually have people from all over the country as well as other countries. So Todd, I always like to level set, and one of the key things to level set is, what is private equity? Because different people may have different definitions, but it would be good to know your definition and how we're approaching it tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. I sometimes I'll say I even get confused because we live in a world that is moving so quickly, so fast. Things are changing at the speed of, for lack of sounding, kind of like a meme, but at the speed of AI. I mean, it seems like things are moving so quickly. And so, I try to bucket these things into, things that I can kind of understand. But there is a lot of overlap. So, when you start getting into the world of alternative investments, you have groups like private equity. You may also hear the term venture capital. You may also hear the term hedge fund. And, many times those groups may overlap with each other in some respects. And so let me try to paint a picture for you. So historically, hedge funds were literally vehicles that were a hedge, meaning a counterbalance, something that was not correlated to the stock market. So if you wanted to make an investment, the idea was, I don't want to just invest in something that's going to do the same thing as the stock market, because if most of my money's in the stock market, or a large sum of my money's in the stock market, I want to hedge against that. So that's where hedge funds really kind of took off. And then you have venture capital, which I believe is pretty straightforward, but venture capital typically invests in companies. And so they're looking for the next Uber, the next OpenAI or ChatGPT or Anthropic, or you name the company, but they're looking for the next, company that's going to do something great. And then private equity is probably the most enigmatic of the three, in that the way I look at our business was, we went out and we literally bought whole loans. And I'm saying the word whole loans because you can also buy securities, which are tradable securities, which is different from me owning a whole loan. So, and I don't want to confuse the audience with that, but the idea is with private equity is many times you're not only investing money into a particular asset class, but you're building a business around it, and or you're actively involved in the management of the business. And so that's how I would relate private equity. So to put that in specific terms for my business and why I term it private equity is we had private capital that came through our company, whether through a fund or a separately managed account or what have you. And we literally invested that money into an asset class, which was distressed, non-performing loans. But instead of sitting back like a hedge fund manager would typically say, I'm going to invest in these securities and sit and watch and just trade, we literally started a business around it. So we had a management company that had to literally go out and maybe knock on doors to talk to borrowers who weren't paying. We had to build out servicing operations to make sure loans got paid and collections occurred. We had to hire foreclosure attorneys or crews to clean up and repair houses. Like there was an actual business involved around it. And so when you think of private equity, I would think of it more as there is a business around the actual investment asset class, not just the investment itself, meaning, hey, it wasn't just investing in non-performing mortgages. I'm investing in those mortgages and I'm building the operational infrastructure around it, or I'm very actively involved in that operational infrastructure. So I think private equity takes that framework, which is private capital going into a space that has an opportunity, but you're going to bring something more than just the capital.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think definitely it's a world that not many people understand very well, or have ever been in or been involved with. So before we go any further, and I'm excited about going further, but this is what we call Power Week, and what we do in Power Week is 3 times a year we have events for entrepreneurs and business owners, and just want to make sure that everybody knows what we got going on this week. If you're in Jersey, definitely, or New York City, you definitely want to check us out. In northern New Jersey, first off, Thursday night we have a networking reception. We're going to do that in Montclair, New Jersey at the Sankofa Cafe. It's always a great time. There's always amazing people there. So if you're available, come join us. And then, we've been doing our events for over 12 years, had over 1,500 attendees. We've got help people get tens of millions of dollars in financing, additional revenues. And it all started with the Power Breakfast. And here's a little bit about what the Power Breakfast is. If you are looking to increase revenues, improve profitability, and or obtain financing for your business, you need to check out the Power Breakfast and Small Business Pro conferences.
My name is Andrew Frazier. One of the things we're here to do is supercharge your day.
Today's Power Breakfast has really been a phenomenal experience. I think it's exactly what business owners need, some true guidance of people who are genuine and really are leading them in the true direction of business growth and expansion.
The Power Breakfast is so important for the entrepreneurial community because it gives the various business people who come together an opportunity to interact and also do some business.
These events, hosted by Andrew Frazier, President and COO of Small Business Like a Pro, will supercharge your day.
Okay, and hopefully you can join us on Friday morning. The Masterpreneur Breakfast, formerly known as the Power Breakfast, is going to be at Galloping Hill Golf Course in Kenilworth, New Jersey. We've got a great event. Our speaker, Gene Bohinski, he's going to be talking about delegate or die. That's one of the areas that a lot of business owners have challenges with. So if you're in the area, definitely come check us out. I'll put the links in the chat so that you can register and join us. So back to the topic, Todd, we're talking about accessing private equity for your business. And, definitely there's some characteristics of the types of businesses private equity, seeks to invest in. There's, also maybe if you can touch on the types of businesses, but also there's different forms of private equity. There's individuals, there's funds, and other sorts. So, just getting an idea of sort of what the private equity landscape looks like and sort of the scope of characteristics of businesses that are, private equity, has interest in.
Yeah. So, I would say the kind of private equity that we have done is not your traditional private equity in that I think, private equity is usually looking to come into businesses that have some form of track record and have been around for a while, probably a minimum of 3 years, really having clean financials, having a really tight story, a great founder, I think it really comes down to a few things. Do you have revenue, or recurring revenue is kind of really hot these days? You have a scalable system, and do you have a management team that isn't just you? So, private equity doesn't typically want to buy a job, which once again is different from what we've done, where we have really been coming in actively managing a business that maybe was being managed by, in our case, a large bank. So I think ours was very unique, but in that we were able to take something that maybe large banks weren't able to do well at scale, and we were able to come in and bring in that infrastructure. So, a private equity firm, quite frankly, could have invested in our company after we had proven ourselves out. We didn't need that capital, but that would be a good example. So I would say when you think of, and I think this is good for the audience, many people that I speak to are really typically looking more for angel investors. They're early in their journey. They haven't necessarily even found their true minimum viable product, their true niche. They have a great idea, great concept, and maybe have a great founder, but they're kind of still early. I think private equity really comes in after that. And this is where I'll say it kind of starts to overlap sometimes with venture capital a bit. And so regardless of what you want to call it, private equity, angel investing, venture capital, at the end of the day, it's still just money, right? We all need money to grow our businesses. And a good reminder for all of us when we think about it is when Elon Musk went and bought Twitter, he called Larry Ellison from Cisco to help him buy it, right? And he's the richest man on the planet, and he still went to raise capital to do what he wanted to do. And so I think, that has really helped me to understand that all of us need to be prepared to raise money no matter where we are in that journey. We could be starting out and needing an angel round of investment. We could be somewhere in the middle, needing that private equity or venture capital investment, or we could be all the way to the stature of like the richest man in the world, and he's still getting capital from people that he knows to do things that he wants to do. And so the key theme throughout this presentation or this discussion should be, we all need to be ready at any given moment to earn the trust of the capital that we are seeking. Because at the end of the day, people, think about yourself, how quickly do you want to give your money to someone else? In fact, my wife, she's a baker, and during COVID, I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time working with her in the baking business or bakery business. We had a shop in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I just loved that business because I would sell a product and people get to taste it and there's immediate satisfaction. It was like the easiest selling I've ever done. But when people give you money, there is no immediate satisfaction. They literally may even go through a sense of buyer's remorse, which is, I hope I made the right decision, because you have to wait for a return on that capital. And so I say that to say, it takes more than just having a good idea. It takes more than even having a good business. You have to have a great leader, a great team, and people around you that are going to help you to earn the trust of that capital so that you limit all the negatives that come with people trusting with capital. And so that's really, I'd say, the key. It's like knowing your numbers, having your story, and it being more than you when you get into private equity. But then also knowing like, hey, maybe I'm still in my angel round. So when I first started raising money for my business, I remember one of my first investors, or I should say my very first investor, was a gentleman by the name of Ken. He was a Stanford graduate, so leverage your networks. He had lived in South Florida, so close by, and he had decided to make an investment. And I had another client who had a liquidity event. So second thing you should hopefully learn is you want to find money in motion. So sometimes it's not who you ask, it's when you ask. So I've learned that in the most important way working at Bank of America, because you realize that the first place people take their money when they have a liquidity event is usually the bank. And so if you can call people at the right time, you have a lot more success. Think about it for yourself, right? It's a lot easier if someone calls me, let's go back to, days when, I really, I got paid on a Friday every 2 weeks, or the 1st and the 15th, or whatever the pay cycle was. It's like, you have a much better chance of getting me to spend money on payday. And in the same way, you have a much greater chance of getting an investor to say yes when they have money in motion, when they just liquidated another investment, now they have cash. And people with capital feel a real sense of fiduciary responsibility to do something with that capital. That's one thing I've learned. It almost feels like an obligation to do something productive. It's not good enough for it to just sit in the bank earning the lowest rate of return. And once you learn how money moves and how wealth creators think, and you get into that flow, then you realize, hey, it's, once again, not always who I ask, it's also when I ask. And so that's really important. And I'll say the final kind of piece to this story, because when you're an entrepreneur, we get so excited about our business. We get excited about our products, our services, and it's great. And we should be. I mean, I wouldn't want to invest with someone who wasn't excited about their products and services. But money doesn't care about your products and services unless they're investing for some altruistic reason. But in general, in a capitalist society, that's not the primary concern. And so I remember one of my wealthy families, I was super excited about a new fund idea, and I'm going on and on and on. And my investor stops me and said, Todd, stop for a second. Just tell me these 3 things. How much money do you need? How long do you need it for? And how much will I get back? How much money do you need? How long do you need it for? And how much will I get back? And if you can answer those 3 questions, and I listen to people pitch me all the time, 90% of the people don't answer those 3 questions. And it took me learning from my investor who told me, and this is after I've been raising money, to really take that to heart. And so I know I said a lot, so I'll pause there, but those are some really great, I think, nuggets of wisdom that will help you go really far in your capital raising journey, whether you're startup or Elon Musk, because I'm sure Elon Musk knew exactly the answers, how much he needed, how long he needed for, and how much his investor was going to get back.
Okay, excellent. Well, you covered on a whole bunch of great things. So I'm just going to take a minute to unpack it for people just to make sure everybody's taking away the lessons in them. And I think one of the key things that you said was that, you got to get to people when money's in motion. But that doesn't just apply to money. That applies to sales. Like, you got to be in front of people when they need what you're offering. And that's what follow-up is all about. So that when they need what you have, they think of you. Many times people need what you have, but they don't need it right now. So by the time they need it, they might forget about you if you're not following up. So timing is so important in everything. You also talked about, people needing financing and sort of everybody needing financing at different points along the journey. And one of the key things a lot of people don't realize is when you grow, it takes cash rather than give you cash. So you can be making money but run out of cash very easily if you're growing, if you don't prepare your financing in advance. So definitely, those are just a couple of the many nuggets that you shared, but just want to at least highlight those for people. So I'm going to go to some questions in the chat because we have quite a few. So definitely appreciate everybody putting in questions, and I'll go through a couple of them fairly quickly because some of them you've sort of answered. So, but what we can do is let's just take the quick ones first. Let's see, where is it? Here we go. Let's go with the first question we had from Matthew. What's the first step to attracting private equity? So if you're looking for private equity, you mentioned that you generally invest in businesses that are ongoing and have revenue and profitability. What is the first step that people should be thinking about or looking at if they're going to try to attract private?
Yeah. So a couple things. Number one, I would say spend a lot of time watching Shark Tank. I think it's a great microcosm of what you need to do and what you need to have ready to be successful with raising private equity. And I'd say, number one, you need to know your numbers, and you need to know your numbers cold. It takes more than just a good idea for people to part ways with their money. And so having strong financials, both in terms of knowing your numbers, but then being able to back it up with real data. So like, here are my financials. And for instance, in our business, getting audited financials makes a huge difference because it's almost like no one believes your numbers unless you get them audited. And many times, I mean, when we were getting, $100 million credit facilities from our banking partners, many of them would force us to use a top 4 accounting firm. So it's like, well, if it didn't come from these top 4, it almost doesn't count. And so financials are very important as you want to scale your business. Number 2, having a clear growth thesis. So, hey, here's where you are today, but how are you going to grow? And I think many times people underestimate the challenge of sales and distribution because that's where the business really, the rubber meets the road, as they say. Without sales, there is no business. And so you could create the iPhone, but if you can't distribute the iPhone and people don't know about the iPhone, it doesn't matter how great the product is. And then I'd say, just, pitch people and really take an audit of your pitch. So find people that you can trust. If that's Andrew, if that's me, if it's someone else, like before you get in front of those opportunities, really take some time to just not be defensive, but really say, I'm willing to learn how I can do better. Because one thing I learned a lot and what's helped me is it's easy for us to talk over people because we know our product so well, we know our service so well. Clients, many times, investors don't necessarily know it like that. And so we need to be able to speak at their level. In fact, I was coaching one of my consulting clients earlier. I help real estate investors and fund managers raise money. And we did 2 client calls today. And I have to say, he did an amazing job. He took my advice, which started with asking questions. We get so hyped in terms of presenting what we have, but we don't take time to just understand. And so I'm going to harp on one word here that I think you said, Matthew asked this question. What is it? That first step to attract. Attraction is something that's really core to human nature. And a good analogy is if you go on a date and you ask a lot of questions, your date can be talking the whole time and you said very little, but you were asking questions. You were engaged. It's not that you weren't talking, but you were really focusing your energy on getting to know that person. That person's going to walk away saying, you know what? I really like Todd. I really like Andrew. And Andrew didn't say that many words, but the other person did. But they like you because you were listening to them. People want to be heard. And what my client did today, he did exactly what I told him to do. Is like, you need to open up by asking questions. What are you looking for? Tell me about your investment journey. What things have worked for you? What things haven't worked for you? Before you even get into your pitch and your offer and everything, obviously that doesn't happen in a Shark Tank environment, but in real world, you're probably going to have one-on-one conversations with many people. Take some time to get to know, and that naturally allows the attraction to occur. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Okay, excellent. So definitely a couple things I love that you said. Number one is knowing your numbers. I think that's one of the greatest fears of most business owners is their numbers and understanding the language of business, which is accounting. That's critical if you want someone to invest in you, or if you ever want to sell. Most businesses never sell and close down. So, it's important. It's so important, but many people find that out too late. You talked about sales and distribution, and managing growth. And, through my entrepreneur assessment, we have growth factors. And one of them is the capacity conundrum, because, you have to build capacity, but manage to grow, to the capacity you have. And that's one of the biggest challenges when you're growing. And, that impacts you have to plan your sales, your distribution, your operation, and manage them dynamically. So definitely, those are key things. Whether you're seeking financing or not, you're going to need to do those things successfully if you're going to scale and continue to grow. So, and then, one of my favorites is, there were 3 books that I usually recommend every business owner read before I wrote my books, of course, because my books are better. But no, the first one, but the one is Dale Carnegie. And right out of Dale Carnegie, it's one of the best books about relationships. And exactly what you taught your client is what Dale Carnegie teaches in his book. If you haven't read it, you should, because there's so much valuable knowledge wrapped up in that. So thanks again for sharing those. I think definitely helpful. So now we had a couple people that asked a similar question. And the question is, how long does it take to secure private equity? Because, like usually when you think of raising money, many times most business owners already needed it. So, what does the time frame, and actually maybe just walk us through the private equity financing journey?
Yeah. So this is a really, important question, because I believe what happens in real life is, even for good businesses, people underestimate the time frame that it takes to raise money. And I would say from that first handshake, right? Like, meaning people said they're going to invest, sometimes it can take 6, 12, even 18 months before the money even comes to you. So you may leave at dinner thinking, oh man, this person's in, and they may 100% be in, but it could take some time for that money to come in. Because from the handshake, you start going into more of what I'll call a real negotiation and a real legal process. So typically you're going to have an LOI, which be a letter of intent. Maybe some people may call it a memorandum of understanding, but typically it'll be an LOI where someone says, okay, here are the terms that I'm willing to invest, or vice versa. You already have an offering document ready to go. This is your private placement memorandum. And this is what I'm going to be offering to the market. But from that kind of LOI to close can probably take 3 to 4 months. And so I think the number one mistake that founders make is running out of runway, while waiting. So it's like, because maybe you even have a lot of positive people around you around, yes, I'd invest. But I call it the arthritis syndrome, right? It's like, it takes, for some reason, when it's time to actually wire the money and write the check, people get arthritis. And so just know that that happens, and you need to give yourself, if it were me, I'd start at least 12 months before I need the capital. This is very similar to relationships. You kind of think of it like, when you're in a relationship, that's when other people, I'm married now almost 26 years, so this is not my situation at all, but I'm just saying, I remember being young, and it's like, when I had a girlfriend, all the girls were more attracted to me. And then when I didn't have a girlfriend, I was hungry, or as we would say in the hood, thirsty, right? Then no one is attracted to you. And so you don't want to be in the market, quote unquote, thirsty. You want to be in the market very confident when you don't need the capital. So you need to have a regular investor game plan, so that you always have investors on deck and ready to go. Because as I said in the very beginning, you need to find that money in motion. And you don't know if it's your investor number 1 or investor number 100, which one has money in motion at any given time. So you need to really have an ongoing investor relations process. And that's probably the biggest difference of those who are successful and those who are not.
All right. So it's about preparation and planning.
Yep.
And the same for traditional financing. I've worked, helped a lot of businesses get millions of dollars in financing, and actually created something for, when I teach people and train people, a process that makes you more likely to get financing, and get financing on better terms. And, the secret to doing that is you have to pray for financing. You can get on your knees and pray, but not only that, you have to prepare yourself in your business. You got to do research of what type of investors and lenders and programs fit your profile. You got to assemble the required documents. A lot of people don't get financed just because they never get all the documents together. And the last and hardest part is you got to yield to the underwriters and analysts. You'll get them all your stuff, but it may still take months before they actually give you any money, or finance you any money. So But the more prepared you are going in, the more successful you're going to be, because a big piece of getting the financing is your credibility. And if you don't come in prepared, that definitely doesn't help your situation of the people financing you getting comfortable with you. So definitely, those are critical things. So now, we've been talking about quite a few things, and I think this is a really good question, because is debt or equity better for scaling a business? Because debt and equity are different and have different places, and also different types of businesses scale differently. So can you share some insights on debt versus equity, and what type of situations make the most sense for each?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've raised capital both ways, across 8 funds and 1.3 billion in transactions. And so, the answer always depends on, what stage you're in and what you're trying to build. And that's, exactly what we unpack in, my training and coaching and the like, because, the real answer is, most sophisticated operators are going to use both. They're going to use debt for assets and operations, and equity for growth, capital, and relationship building to really expand the business. So I don't think it's either. I think it's, in what order. And so let's just break it down. I think you use debt when you have predictable cash flow so that you can service it, because debt is very stressful if you can't pay the bill. You Debt is also really helpful when you want to retain ownership. So if I feel really strong about my numbers and I can service the debt, then I would prefer debt and retain the equity ownership. And then this goes without saying, but the return on your equity needs to be greater than the debt. And so, I'm actually surprised when I look at some deals where people are willing to actually take out debt that is almost nearly the same return as their equity. And then at that point, it makes me question the operator, because I feel like they're desperate at that point. And so the debt should always be cheaper than your equity. You use equity when, your cash flow is unpredictable, your early stage. Use equity when you need more than just the money, but you really need a strategic partner. So, my first equity partners in my business, they were not there just for the money. They were introducing me to other relationships. My client who had at the time probably about $100 million of net worth, he introduced me to one of his friends who was managing the family who had over $1 billion, and he was part of the family. And then I remember that family introduced me to one of their business partners. So when a billionaire family says, Todd, I'm going to introduce you to so-and-so, and they have, a lot of money, like, it just kind of opens your horizons around, like, hey, there's levels to this thing, and everyone's, your greatest resources many times, not just the money that someone can put in. In fact, my first investor, the money put in was actually less important than the relationships he introduced me to. And so, I would say you want someone who's an equity partner more so than just the money, but they're bringing something unique to the table. And so that's the best way I can really, put it. It's just, being very conscientious around what you can truly pay, what you can truly afford, what stage you're at in your business. And like I said in the beginning, great companies use both.
Excellent. So, I think definitely that makes a lot of sense. And you had mentioned that it can take time raising money to get the money, but also it can take a lot of time just to be able to, you have to invest a lot of your own time in being able to get up to that point to get money. And how important is networking in private equity, and what type of, how much time do you need to allocate, because that's time away from your business and growing your business as well. So you have, there's trade-offs. So if you could share a little bit about those, that would be great.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is, I'd say this is the hardest thing for any entrepreneur who is building, a startup business or scaling a business. Is, in my opinion, networking is everything. There's just no way to do both at the scale and at the efficiency required to both operate the business and to build the capital that the business needs. And so, I think the statistic is probably something like 70% of private equity deals never even hit the public marketplace. They're done through building relationships. By the time we hear about being able to invest in ChatGPT or technically OpenAI or you name the company, it's already gone through a round or two by the time we even hear about it. So networking is really everything. I find this to really be an operator's challenge. What I raise equity for is to hire my team, because as you scale your business, you're going to constantly need more and more capital. And so if I'm the face of the business and I'm going out raising the money, that means I'm not there operating the business. So you need to find someone that can help you really operate the business while you're raising the money, or vice versa. You're operating the business, but then you need to have someone who can really be the face of your company and is out there raising the capital on a full-time basis, because it's those are two very different things. And I saw this with one of my investors in the real estate business. He was a production builder building 20 to 25 homes a month. And he was raising capital, but then he handed over the construction to his kids, who were, they're adults, but they didn't know what he knew. They hadn't built 30,000 doors, he had. And so while he was doing that, the other side of the business was struggling. And then as he shifted back to trying to get a handle on construction, well, then who was managing and raising capital for the business? And so those are two very separate and distinct things. So I really encourage you to, take relationship building and networking that's been where my growth has come from. I mean, you're not going to cold call a billionaire and get them to invest money. So it's going to come through relationships.
No, great points. I mean, I think that it can take a lot of time and energy away from your business if you're not careful. And, not only that, you need to be prepared, or it's going to take way longer, and the likelihood of you even getting any financing is very low. It's better not to go out there than to go out there unprepared, I would say.
And I think one of the things I'll just really point out again is, like, know where you are in your business cycle, right? So, just because this is confusing, and it's confusing for me too, but, just trying to give people a better framework. Like we kind of talked about angel investing. So these are people who just, for lack of a better word, I'm just going to say they believe in you. Like they just believe that you're going to do something. You have some special gift, talent, resource. They believe in you. The next stage would be like that venture capital, where you're still early, you're still in the startup phase, you're still a high risk. They probably are investing for 7 to 10 years plus. You may not even be positive in revenue yet. And that's okay. But then private equity, when you start getting into private equity, it's like you're getting into established cash flowing businesses. People are looking for a proven business model. Once again, now they're buying a business model. And their timeline is shorter, maybe 3 years, 7 years. And so knowing where you are from angel to venture to private equity is really important, because when I was angel investing, in my mind, I really thought of myself more as like venture capital. And quite frankly, I probably even thought more private equity-ish, like, hey, this is, lower risk. But the reality was, I remember my investor, Nick, saying to my other investor, Ken, and he said, I introduced him for the first time at a restaurant. And I remember Nick saying to Ken, hey, Ken, I don't know if we're going to make money, but I really like this kid. And that kind of hurt me as an entrepreneur, because I'm like, what do you mean? I don't want you to invest because you like me. I want you to invest because you think we're going to make money. But the reality was he invested because he likes me. And so knowing where you are now, when you get to private equity, people aren't investing because they like you. They're investing because they like your proven business model. Right. And so they may not like you at all, but they may say, hey, you're talented and this business can operate without you for it to still be successful. And so I think that's really important as we kind of, come more to a close here. Just really want that framework to be important so that, the timing will change. At angel investing, you could probably get an investor very quickly because they're just investing in you. By the time you get to private equity, you're going to have all your numbers lined up and returns and everything, so that people say, hey, I'm investing in this, I'm buying a business model. So that time frame is going to take a lot longer.
Definitely. And you, like you said, you got to start early. Nobody's going to invest in you if they don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And what
100%.
you're about and networking. So,
Yeah.
The only bad part about this show is an hour is just not long enough to talk to people. I think we could probably talk about this for 30 hours and not be done. But our audience isn't going to hang out that long. So, but what I always like to do is have guests share 3 key takeaways from our discussion tonight, because I think we talked about a lot of amazing stuff, but some people's brains are exploding right now because many people can't really remember more than 3 things at a time. And 3 things makes it easy to really take that tomorrow and figure out how to utilize that for greater success in your business. So definitely, if you could share 3 things. But while you're doing that, I just want to share a little bit more about our upcoming events. So let's see what we got. So, I mentioned before, it's Power Week. So this Friday, we've got the Masterpreneur Breakfast. So if you're around in the area, definitely come. Oh, sorry, that was the old one. This is the new one. So Friday from 8 to 11, Galloping Hill Golf Course in Kenilworth, New Jersey. Our featured guest speaker is Gene Bahinsky. He's been on the show as well. And he's going to be talking about delegate or die. For small business owners, the only way you're going to grow is if you develop your team. And, developing a team proves very difficult for a lot of people. And Gene, has created a virtual assistant company that provides great resources for business owners at a reasonable cost and a way to learn how to delegate more effectively. I've already got 2 full-time, the equivalent of 2 full-time VAs, and that allows me to do a lot of the great things I've been able to do. So figuring out that first delegation strength, capabilities, and helping to learn, figuring out how to do it well. And then, of course, the pre-breakfast networking event on Thursday evening in Montclair. Definitely always a great time. So if you can join us at either of these, you're welcome to. We've got the links in the chat, and we'll go from there. But Todd, what are 3 things people should take away from what we talked about tonight?
Yeah, I just dropped those 3 things in the chat. I think number one, capital follows preparation, and kind of ended at that, not with desperation. I used the word thirsty earlier. Just, always you need to have an ongoing strategy for raising capital. And it's actually easier to raise money when you don't need the money. So just constantly being open to investment, and not only just the capital, but maybe the human capital, the resources, the network that people can introduce you to. Number 2, your network. We've all heard this before, but your network is your net worth. And, as I said earlier, over 70% of private capital deals never hit the public marketplace. So the investor who knows you already, or knows someone right? That's who's going to make the investment. So start building those relationships today, not when you're actively fundraising. And I've been guilty of that. If I could go back in time, that's one thing I would change tremendously. I would be more intentional around staying in touch with people, just around birthdays and anniversaries and and sharing a news article, or just when I didn't need anything, because we tend to reach out when we need something. And then finally, just, know your stage, know your capital. And I kind of broke it down. Venture capital is betting on the dream. Private equity is buying the machine. Debt scales what's working, and equity is going to fund what's not proven yet. And I can't say this enough. If you get the wrong capital at the wrong stage, it can sink a great business. So you really need to match the money to the moment. And I just, want to really thank your audience. Great questions, great feedback. This is what it takes. And tonight was really just about pulling back the curtain on a world that, has always been reserved for the wealthy and well-connected. And that wasn't me. I mean, I'm late to the party, so to speak, but that's exactly why I built what I built. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, is to really change that. And happy to be a resource to anyone that just needs some more guidance. So really a pleasure, and, really kudos to the audience and the questions tonight.
Great. No, thank you so much. I mean, definitely, capital follows preparation. I think back in the military, we said prior preparation prevents poor performance. So that's key. And then, your network and relationships are really everything, not only in business, but in life. So learning how to do that effectively is key. And, the last one, knowing your stage, knowing where you are. I created the Masterpreneur Journey, which is the 5 steps to going from starting to scaling a business, and really understanding which step you're in, because each step has different financing needs, different challenges, different leadership skills needed. And, we outline that in our Masterpreneur journey and in our training for the university. But, understanding where you are, what stage you're in, what you need the financing for, because, not getting financing can be bad, but getting the wrong financing could be worse. I've had to save a lot of companies who had the wrong financing, and it was painful for them. So, so definitely, make sure you know what you're doing and you get the help that you need to do it successfully. So, perfect. So, Todd, anything you want to share before we close out?
Oh man, I really, I really just want to impart the fact that anyone can do this. To think that somehow, I always remember a number 232, which was how much my parents paid in rent, $232 a month, and it's just the fact that that same kid from South Central could somehow be an advisor to multimillionaires and billionaires, and do 8 funds, and It's just a testament to anything really being possible. And if there's one thing that I believe Andrew is doing so well, is he's creating real resources for you to leverage what has already been learned, right? You don't have to start from scratch, right? Masterpreneur is here for a reason. So like, use these resources. I mean, I met with Andrew here in Charlotte, where we recently moved to. And I mean, I look at him as a mentor for me. And so I say that because I'm sure there's things he can learn from me, but there's a lot I can learn from him. And so I just encourage you to not go alone, like learn from someone. You're going to go much faster. And what's the saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so go together is where I'd leave it.
Definitely. And relationships are about value both ways. So, definitely we've already learned some from each other, and I'm sure we will continue. And that's what makes a good relationship successful. So thank you again, Todd. I greatly appreciate you joining us tonight. Hang in there a minute while I close things out. But, definitely just want to let everybody know, appreciate your questions. I think it's been a great show. Todd's, shared some extremely valuable knowledge and expertise that not many places that you'll have an opportunity to learn what he's talking about. And, we've got his LinkedIn profile in the chat. So if you want to connect with him, also his website, so you can learn more about him and what his company does. So definitely encourage you to do that, especially if you feel that you're in the space of, where private equity might be a fit for what you're doing. So definitely appreciate that. Looking forward to next week. Every week we have a great guest, and next week's the same. Actually, we're going to have Hurley Fox, who's working on the concept of your business. And actually, he was my intern about 6 years ago. And, he reached out to me. He was like, I'm going to work for you. And been proactive, did great work for me, learned a lot from me, and created, a financial management company that works with real estate agents. So, he's definitely under 30, maybe even under 25. And he has a very thriving business. So, I always say there's 3 things that you have to do to be successful in business. You got to be proactive. You got to go after stuff, like he did. He came, was like, I want to work with you. You got to be creative. You got to do stuff differently, and you got to be flexible to provide what people need, when and how they need it. So definitely look forward to talking to him about his journey and, how he developed his business. At the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, business owner, the key to success is the more that you know, the faster and more successfully your business is going to grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.